And I think if you can kind of change that, have a bit more of a humble mindset and view of yourself, then, that helps massively as well.
Two traders, Darren and Walter, pull back the curtain on profitable trading systems, consistent money management, and profitable psychological triggers. Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast.
Welcome to Two Traders Podcast. You're listening to Walter Peters, and I've got Darren on the line. Hello, Darren.
Good evening, Walter.
So we've got this question, which is, I think, probably in the back of many traders' minds, which is essentially this. You've decided to put yourself out there. I've decided to put myself out there. And the question is, why, if you're such a great trader, why don't you just go stand in your own little corner and make all this money all by yourself? Why share it? Why talk about trading, teach trading? Why do you do that? That's the question.
Okay. Am I going first on this one?
Oh, a couple can go. No, I can go first. I'm happy to go first. So
yeah, you go first.
Okay, yeah.
You go first this time.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, a couple of things. Okay. When I first started trading, there was one book about forex and it totally sucked. Okay. And then later I found out when my friend met that guy that he didn't even really trade. Okay. So I understand the question. I get it. Here's what I'll tell you about what I've learned, and this is only in the last 2 weeks, and this is directly because of the fact that I interact with traders every day, okay? In the last 2 weeks, I've learned of an automated system that I never would have traded in my life, ever. But because a friend of mine shared it with me, who was one of my first students, and he's been doing it for over 5 years, trading the same automated system, it's completely changed my approach and how I see trading. And that's a direct result from having, interacting with trading. Number two, I've met traders that have completely turned around some of my assumptions about trading through the mentoring process. I get emails almost every day, and I can't honestly say every day, but almost every day, certainly every week, from traders who are like, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. This is what happened when I started doing this and blah, 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 and simplifying my charts and yada, yada, stuff like that. I mean, these are traders I don't even know. They're just watching, I don't know, like videos or stuff, they're like, or they read the book or whatever. So it's hard for me to sit here with a straight face and say, yeah, any trading guru who says take a look at this, try this, maybe you should do this. It's not a one-way street at all. And that's just not the way it works. Now, one of the interesting things about it is when you work with traders, oftentimes the really, really good ones, when they hit it, they won't really say much. They'll just kind of go. Sometimes they'll take off, and sometimes they'll, if you ask them, they'll tell you what's going on. But sometimes they'll like say a formal goodbye and everything. I got one of those too in the last 2 weeks, which is great, because that's part of the mentoring process. Really, what the mentoring process is, and I learned this in psychology because it was fascinating. I didn't know that this was true, but typically what happens in the mentoring process is the end result. The goal really should be that the student believes the student can do the skill better than the master, and then the student cuts off the relationship. That's like the normal ending to the mentoring relationship. And now I think some mentors might take offense to that, but because I knew that was what happened going into it, it's like, it's cool when people graduate and do things like that. I've had opportunities to trade with traders who I consider much better than me, as in terms of like pure results. And that's all come from working with students. So awesome people all around the world. I've visited a lot of traders. I find it really fun to not only give what I can, which, by the way, for me, the whole reason why I even started doing this was my broker called me up and said, what are you doing? And I explained it to him. And he said, well, that's interesting. Do you want to do some webinars for my clients or whatever? And I said, yeah. And then it kind of steamrolled from there. And then he said, do you want to do a book? Do you want to do blog posts for my website and stuff like that? So that's how the whole thing started for me, was like that. And I have to admit, I do enjoy teaching because I kind of had the bug, got the bug when I was a graduate student in the United States. I don't know if you know how it works in the United States. Maybe it's the same over there in the UK, but essentially they use slave labor, Darren. They use graduate students to do the teaching in a lot of courses. in the universities because they're cheap. So instead of having a professor do it, they have a graduate student. And I did it, and I totally sucked the first year, stunk it up awful bad, and slowly learned how to teach, get a little bit better at it, I think, as we went. Well, my evaluations, you get these evaluations, so you know kind of what students think about you at the end of the year. It's too bad they don't evaluate you earlier on, so you know that you stink. But anyway, so I have to admit, it is kind of fun for me to teach as well. It's opened up a lot of opportunities. I've completely changed my trading in many ways because of the ideas that it's a cross-pollination process. And I never claimed to be the best trader anyway. So that's all up. That's my take on it. And I'd be really interested to hear sort of what you have to say about this. Because I know this is in the back of a lot of traders' minds. Like, what are you doing this? What's going on? What's this all about? What's your deal?
Yeah, I agree with you on nearly all of that, Walter. And I think often the question comes from a point of view that trading is solely about money. And, I think that's wrong for a start, because I think if you're going to do something as a career and long term, if it is purely about money, there's very few people with the sort of personality that can enjoy that and maintain it. And, also there's this assumption that when you mentor or teach or maybe run a website, that you're kind of saying this is the ABC of trading and it will generate this amount of profit and this is the way to do it and every other way is wrong. And it's not necessarily always about a strategy as such. It can often be about a different point of view of how to approach the markets. It can be a different way of looking at trading that you're sharing with people, and then the idea being that then within that group people will go off in tangents, kind of using that core idea and develop strategies from that. And I think any good trading method will have different ways to apply it. You can have a scalping version of it, you can have more of a swing way of trading it. For me personally, it's more about saying this is a different way to look at making profit from the movement of price. So I'm not really going out there and saying to people, this is what you have to do on this pair in this way, that's how you manage your entries. I don't really want to do that, because we both know, and I think most people know, that's very difficult to do, because very few strategies are simply A, B and C. There's a certain amount of discretion in there, and I much prefer to have kind of a broad way of looking at the market and then getting together with mainly experience. It doesn't have to be experienced traders, I think new traders as well. And it's more about nurturing that idea and seeing where people can take it. And from that process, I've certainly learnt, probably as much as anyone who I've been sharing my ideas with. And so, I'm with you on that. It's a two-way street, definitely. And also I'm really strong on this thing about it not being all about money. I don't want to just be a trader and get rich. I want kind of a bit more to my life than that. And also, me personally, I'd feel slightly uncomfortable if my only income and my only way of making money was to be a trader, because I also know that you can do really well for a long time, and there's a lot of traders who've been around for years and years that have had periods where they've done really well and periods where they've given money back and then had to evolve and perhaps change their strategies or diversify their strategies. So to be so narrow-minded, I don't think in this sort of field is advantageous. And so, I'm very much more for sharing ideas and working with a like-minded group.
Yeah, that's interesting. So here's a question for you, given what you've said about that. What do you think is likely to happen? Like, let's say you've got two traders. Okay, hypothetically, we've got one trader who he trades maybe, 6 hours a week. Okay, that's his trading time that he sets aside. However he divides it up, he's got 6 hours that he trades, and then he's also like he plays polo or something, right? And he's really into polo, and maybe has a side business related to polo. I don't even know how you would make money renting horses or something. I don't know. Anyway. And then you've got another guy, and this guy, he trades, 60 hours a week. And that's all he thinks about. That's all he does. Fast forward 10 years. And for those of you that are too young to know what fast forward means, do you remember the old cassette tapes, Darren?
Yeah, I do, unfortunately.
Yeah, me too. I remember 8-track. We used to have an 8-track in our car. Anyway.
Hey,
yeah?
Cassettes are really back in vogue now, mate.
Really? Are they? You're kidding me?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
No.
I'm sitting on a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so okay, fast forward 10 years, who would you rather be? So I'm asking you, Darren, would you rather be the guy who has a really strong side interest, who doesn't spend every waking hour looking at the charts trading, or the guy who's, just totally jumped in with both feet, and 10 years later, who would you rather be?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, me personally, I'm quite... The word is a neophile, and it means that you like the new and you like change. So if I did one thing, it wouldn't really work for me. Also, we did, in a previous webinar a long time ago, we did a thing about when they studied the people that became geniuses, and they found that the people who really excel tend to have much broader interests and broader knowledge. So, the best mathematicians weren't just interested in math, they were interested in other things. So, you could also argue that the person with interests outside of trading is kind of putting him in a position to be more successful as well.
Right. So that was Einstein's secret then, because he really liked the ladies, didn't he? That's what I heard. That's what I heard. I don't know if it's true, but that's what I heard about Einstein. I remember that episode. Yeah, you brought up a really good point. I wasn't aware of that research, but yeah, so it makes sense. I mean, I guess it's obvious, that I'm kind of setting up the straw man, but I suppose my only point would be this, guys, for the listener, maybe. When you're new to trading, it can really suck you in and envelop you your whole life. But I think the long haul, if you look at the big picture, look at the long term, from a long-term point of view, you're probably going to be better off being a little bit more balanced, as Darren said. And that's probably going to help you too. And, one of the things that I found fascinating about being, sort of being in academia for so long, because I essentially was in academia for like 8 years or something like that, 8 or 9 years. And what I found fascinating, and I just couldn't get it, was that you would have these people. Okay, so these are really smart professors, right? And they're doing this research. They're devoting their lives to writing these studies up, that in writing them in journals that nobody ever reads. but that's their life, right? And they're really, it's really important to them. But what I found fascinating was how often there would be some idea in another field, or even just somebody in the same field but in a different sort of division. So, for example, in psychology, you have people who study developmental psychology, which is how people change over time, right? And different stages of life and things like that. It's not necessarily just children, but developmental could be the whole lifespan. And then you have neuroscientists who look at the brain and look at what's going on in the brain. Well, a lot of times there were issues that would come up that the developmental psychologists would look at one way and the neuroscientists would look at it a completely different way. And these people would literally cross each other in the hallways, and they weren't aware of how valuable the ideas were from the other sort of research domain. You know what I mean? And the reason why I bring this up, the reason why I bring this up is because that's what happens when I think exactly what you were talking about before from the previous episode, and you brought up today, which is, sometimes what it takes is just a slightly different angle, approaching it from a slightly different angle. And that's what you get when you have other traders, when you're interacting with other traders, when you see that. And I think you were kind of basically touching on that point too, which is, look, even if you don't have a community of traders that you belong to, which I think you should, but if you don't, at least find one trader that you can talk to every week and bounce ideas off of and see it from their point of view and present stats and ideas and things to another trader. Because if you don't do that, then you're probably not going to see those really obvious ideas that the professors don't see when they walk by each other in the hallways. They're not aware. I mean, some of them are. Some of them make an effort to learn about what's going on and what other people are doing in the same department, but other people don't, and they don't reap the benefits of seeing it from another theoretical viewpoint. So I think that's a really critical part of this, and it's underrated. It's underrated, the fact that you can get so much out of interacting with other traders for not even, it doesn't have to be the focus of your trading. It can just be a little side bit, just side dish. It could just be a side dish, but it can really add value to your trading and how you see things. And so I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And those good ideas, they often come from people involved in different fields, don't they? If you've got all of the top technical analysts together in a room, they're not going to come up with anything new. You kind of need that new input, and you've got to go to it with the right mindset, that just because somebody has perhaps got less trading knowledge or experience than you, it doesn't mean that they're going to have it doesn't mean they're not going to come up with a good idea. And I think that it's that whole mindset of being open-minded, and that that there is just so many ways to approach this. And if you just kind of follow all of the the rules that everyone agrees on, that's written in all of the books, you're just kind of going to find yourself in a bit of a dead end. And it's really difficult to do that as well. It's really difficult to listen to people who've got ideas that kind of jar with one element of your approach, and honestly look at those ideas with an open mind. I find it all the time is when I make real improvements with my trading, it's where I take something that I'm been 100% this is the way to do it, and I just I think I just kind of this person keeps saying to me about this other way of doing it, I'm going to have a look at it. And I've often made real improvements to my trading by doing that, and it took me a long time to get there. And I think a lot of us are quite well educated, and perhaps we think we're smarter than we are, and it's very easy to kind of get in that trap of thinking we're a lot better than we are, and this should be easy for us. And I think if you can kind of change that, have a bit more of a humble mindset and view of yourself, then that helps massively as well.
Yeah, and I think the thing that you just said that really resonates with me is this idea of doing things like everyone else does. That's why I think it's weird that people go and get certified for like trading things. And I understand why they need to do it, but it's weird to me that you can go and take a course and sit for a license and they say, okay, now you're a certified technical analyst or whatever. Like, that's because to me, like, the underlying assumption of that is that means everybody, when they look at the charts, everybody should really understand, well, this is how you read a stochastic or whatever. That's just weird to me. Like, I don't, it's like that idea came from somebody who's not a trader. One of the real eye-opening things for me that I read early on was there's this book called, I probably haven't read it in 10 years, but I still have it. And it's this book called I think it's called The Complete Trader. It's either The Complete Trader or The Complete Day Trader. I'll put a link in the show notes for you guys. But you know what he said? Jake Bernstein was his name who wrote it. And he said, when the market goes over, so I was looking at stochastics at the time. So what happens, a lot of people, they see if it's oversold, then they'll buy. And if it's overbought, then they'll sell, right, on the stochastic, because it's an oscillator. It oscillates up and down. And it breaks down when the market's trending in a strong direction. But what he would do is he would actually do the opposite. So as soon as the market got to overbought, he would buy. Because what he noticed is there was often still a really strong, he called it the stochastic pop, and the market would pop in the direction that it's been going and go a little bit further. So he's just trying to get that little extra move that that the market often made when it did that, whereas everyone else was scrambling to sell. And so I found that fascinating. I thought that's really kind of clever, and I tested it, and it worked. And now it worked much better when the market was breaking down and out of a sideways range, but it still could work. And I understood the logic behind it and everything, and I thought that was really interesting. But I can guarantee you, if you were to sit for some sort of trading certification, that's not what they would teach you. They would teach you that, okay, it's oversold, so you buy and it's overbought, all that sort of thing. That's just why I think it's weird. It's just weird to me that everyone needs to get in a box and learn the same thing. Okay, now you're a trader. That's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at the facts that the majority are losing, you don't want to be in the majority. It's the same with moving averages, where people say, well, I used a 200 period moving average because everyone looks at it. Well, I'd be thinking, okay, well, I'll use the 172 period then, because nobody's looking at that. And I want to be the 1%, not the 99% looking at the 200. And it's just kind of this assumption that those kind of elements are the difference.
Yep, I'm with you.
It's much more subtle than that.
I just want to ask you one last question. What is the one thing that you can say it happened from your interaction with traders and working with traders? You can say, wow, I'm really glad that I learned that. Is there one thing that kind of stands out for you that you say, wow, that's amazing. I'm so glad that I learned that. And I don't know if I would have learned that, had I been in my own little corner reading my books and, all on my own, I probably wouldn't have run into that idea.
I'd say two things. One, the most glaring one is that everybody makes the same mistakes, regardless of experience and background and how they've come to trade in. Everybody tends to make the same mistakes. So, for me, it was looking at those mistakes and thinking, right, forget about everything else, the technicals. Let's deal with those mistakes. Let's take those obvious mistakes out of my trading first. So that was the first one. And as an example, closing trades too early. So it became obvious to me that if everybody's got this mistake, the majority are losing, this is a big issue. And if you can sort that out, that should make a big difference to your results. So that was the first one. And the second one, basically talking with you and you continually going on about your different opinion on setting position size. And I kind of ignored it for about a year. And then I looked at it and it's kind of improved my trading a lot. So those are the two things.
That's funny. That's cool. Yeah, I have two that I like that I'll point to too. One of them is basically come from your ideas, which is, that you don't really need to spend a whole lot of time overthinking the reason why you're getting into a trade. That doesn't have to be the focus. So that's a really strong, I understand, idea, is that, which I believe is kind of the core of your trading, at least as I understand it. Yeah, which is, you look, guys, you're overthinking it. You don't need to overthink the entry. And then the other one is that I was aware of this idea 10 years ago, and I understood like 10% of it. But now, from working with students, I've learned that you really can advance your account quickly if you just make sure that you're adding to your winners. And to me, that's such a powerful idea, because so many people are focusing on the win rate and how do I get my win rate up and this and that, when really what I think they should be focusing on, at least not everyone, but many traders, is on, answering the question, how do I get more out of my winning trades? Rather than how do I get more winning trades, you should ask yourself, how do I eke more out of my winners? And then basically it boils down to adding to your winners. When you're on a winner, really take advantage of it. So those are the two. And you don't necessarily have to add more risk when you do that. That's the other part of that, which is the real kicker. But yeah, so that's, for me, those are the things that I would say are probably that really stand out. And it's fun. I mean, I think it's fun to have, to know that, like, if you were in another country, there's a trader there that would open, like, say, come on over, let's talk and hang out at my place, or I'll show you around or whatever. Like, you can do that when you're part of a trading community. You can do that. You can go to different places and meet traders and stuff. Like, I mean, there are so many places around the world where I could go and literally say, hey, to one of the traders I know, hey, I'm in your city. Do you want to hang out or whatever? And that's kind of a cool thing, because, growing up, I never thought I would get a passport, So I was a typical American. I was really introverted, and so, the fact that, two things have kind of opened up my world. One was surfing, which part of surfing is traveling to different waves and things like that. But the other part of it was trading and opening me up to different ideas from people in different countries and stuff. So I really find it fascinating how my life has gone, because if you would have asked me when I was 10 or 12 or 13 even, I would probably have said, I'll probably stay where I'm at and not go very far. It's pretty good here. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I would have. But instead, surfing and trading have kind of opened up my world. So it's been pretty cool. Yeah.
I think at 10, I was already adamant that I was going to leave where I was.
Really? Wow.
So I was the opposite. I wanted to get away. I wanted to move.
Yeah. Well, see, it's interesting. Like, you kind of, it's like the fish who can't see the fishbowl. Like, where I grew up in California, everyone talks about how great it is. It's almost like you get brainwashed. Like, this is the greatest.
Sure, yeah. I noticed that a lot with Americans. I think they grow up in that culture where it's kind of drummed into you to say, look, America's great. We've got everything here, and you have, really. And so, why do you want to get a passport and fly to another country? I noticed that with other traders I know from New York who sort of rarely leave America. I'm always trying to get them to come to Thailand and say, oh, come Thailand, hang out, you'll love it. It'll blow your mind. So, no, I might go down to Key West or something,
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, no, it's so true. It's so true. You get drummed into your head that that you live in the greatest place. Why would you ever leave? And in fact, just the other day, I saw someone post a picture on Facebook from from back where I'm from, and they're like, oh, it's tough living here, sort of thing, and blah blah blah. Look how beautiful it is, and this is why I never leave. And travel opened up for me. Traveling opened up, and like I wouldn't have moved to Australia if it wasn't for trading. The reason why I moved to Australia was because I wanted to see the London Open, and I didn't like waking up at 1 a.m. every night to do that. So that's why, it's fascinating. Yeah.
And I found out about trading when I was traveling. If I hadn't gone traveling, I wouldn't have, seen someone trading and asked him about it. And, I was kind of in that environment where you're kind of being sociable and talking to people that going up to strangers and chatting to them and finding out what they're doing. And, I wouldn't have done that.
That's fascinating. Maybe we should, maybe in the next episode, we can talk about kind of how you got into it. Because I don't know that story, Darren. That's interesting. I'd be interested in hearing how you bumped into a trader in some exotic location and you're like, oh, what are you doing on that computer or whatever? That I think that would be interesting. But I think it's time probably to wrap this one up. So any closing thoughts? I just think it's important, guys, to know that you can get a lot out of interacting with other traders, however you decide to do that. Even if it's just getting one trading buddy, it doesn't have to be a whole community. But I think the cross-pollination of ideas is really critical. It's critical in science. It's critical in your development. It's critical in trading. And you just won't get outside the fishbowl if you don't do that. So I think it can be a really fruitful area for you.
Yeah, I thought excellent podcast today, mate. I think this kind of really strikes at the core of how you can make improvements to how you can actually get better at trading, and just the ideas that the things that we've got from working with other traders. There's enough in that to build a lot of systems in itself. So yeah, great podcast tonight.
Cool. Well, we'll see you next time, Darren. Thanks for your time.
Cheers, Walter.